Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Meet the Mission, the podcast where we highlight the minds behind the missions that matter, from cyber defense to concrete infrastructure and everything in between. I'm your host, Candice Scarborough, Technical Director here at Parsons, cybersecurity strategist, and infrastructure fangirl when the moment calls for it. And today, it absolutely does. Today's episode is all about bridges, the kind that take years of engineering precision, massive team coordination, and the kind of vision that turns street and cables into lifelines for entire regions. Joining me today are two absolute legends in the bridge world and trusted leaders at Parsons. First up is Tom Spoth, Senior Vice President and Bridge Technical Organization Lead. Tom brings 4 decades of expertise in structural engineering and has led the design of some of the most iconic bridges across the US. If there's a challenge in front of him, be it a suspension bridge, a cable-stayed span, or complex bridge rehab, you can bet he's already sketching a solution. And with him is Seth Condell, Vice President and New York, New Jersey Bridge Practice Lead. Seth is a pioneer in the design build innovation and a strategic force behind many of Parsons' most high-profile infrastructure project successes. He's helped deliver critical crossings across the US and Canada and overseas, and always pushing the envelope of what's possible. Together, these two lead with a combination of technical excellence, mentorship, and just the right amount of bridge geekery to make this one of the most exciting and important corners of our mission at Parsons. So let's dig in. From Gordie Howe International Bridge and New Tacoma Narrows Bridge to existing icons such as the mighty Mackinac Bridge and Brooklyn Bridge rehab projects, from local legacy to global leadership. We're talking innovation, impact, and what it takes to build bridges that last generations. All right. Thank you for being here with me today, Tom and Seth. I want to start, I want to hear where you guys are located. A lot of our listeners are listening from all across the globe, and so we want to make sure that people understand kind of the breadth of where our technical expertise lives and resides. So, Seth, where are you coming from today? Where are you based?
Sure. So I am in New York. I live out on Long Island, but our office, which has a historical background for being here in New York City, is actually downtown in the financial district. We're right around the corner from Wall Street to locate everyone, and our windows look over Trinity Church and across the river into New Jersey.
Oh, that must be an awesome experience. And so I know a lot of people probably didn't realize that there was an office right downtown.
Our office has been downtown for over 100 years. We've had various offices in the area, but we've been in this particular location since 2002.
That's super exciting. All right, Tom, and where are you joining us from today? And hopefully that's your home location too.
So I too am in my home office here in New York City, 100 Broadway downtown, as Seth was saying. I've hung my hat here for all my years at Parsons, more than 40 now, as you mentioned. And I'll go anywhere for a big bridge, and we'll probably learn about some of those today because I have.
That's really exciting. So what do you think? And this is, sorry guys, it's not something I talked to Seth and Tom about before, so I'm gonna spring a little question on them. But what do you think makes, New York City kind of a pristine central location for bridge expertise? You guys are both there, right? So what do you think it is about New York City?
Well, you don't have to do much to look around and see all the major suspension bridges and many other types too. But there's a plethora of major suspension bridges all around New York. Verrazano, George Washington, Brooklyn Bridge, all up the East River. It's just an exciting place to be. And there's many clients that own these bridges. They're not all, say, for example, New York City DOT. There's the MTA Bridges and Tunnels, the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey, and so on. And right across the river, there's a clients over there, New Jersey Turnpike, for a project we're working on now. And the Port Authority as well owns bridges in New Jersey. So it's a great place to be.
Awesome.
So And if you date back to the Brooklyn Bridge in the 1880s, so that was obviously a major engineering feat of its time, all the way up through the heyday of bridge engineering. I would personally cap at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, which is, my mother watched that get built when she was just a young lass in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And our legacy firm, Steinman, Boyd, Gronquist, and Birdsall, David Steinman is the founder of what this office has now grown into. And historically, when the Roebling Wireworks closed, their chief engineer, Blair Birdsall, came to this office. So there is a lot of history that goes back literally to, just after the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's a very exciting place to work. There's a lot of history, and our library here is chock full of hand-signed documents by some of these really giants in the industry.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like you said, the historical context and that just seems like a really good place to be to enrich kind of what you're bringing to the table and historically understand the impacts. All right. So icebreaker questions, because, before we get into the nitty gritty, we just want to know a little bit more about you and a little bit more about the leaders in our organization. So first question, and I'll give this one to you, Seth. What's the most breathtaking bridge you've ever crossed, whether you worked on it or not?
So for me, you really can't discount the Brooklyn Bridge with the Golden Gate Bridges. Those are iconic. They're world class, and anyone that has ever looked at a bridge probably has audited those. But for me, I'm also drawn in by bridges that are in picturesque settings. So I have to add to my list the Mackinac Bridge between the Upper and Lower Peninsula that our firm designed back in the 50s, and we still maintain and support. And also the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in the Puget Sound in Washington State, which has a tremendous history as a bridge site, which we can get into later, but also is just beautiful, beautiful scenery.
All right. I love that. Okay. What about you, Tom? What is the most breathtaking bridge you've ever crossed, whether you worked on it or not?
Yeah, so this is actually a very tough question. I'm right here in the shadow of the Brooklyn Bridge. I've spent many years, more than 40 actually, working on the Mackinac Bridge, and I've literally worked on half of the suspension bridges in the United States. However, I would lay out as Golden Gate as my most iconic. And there's a reason for that, because I did do work on Golden Gate when I was back in the 90s, a little bit younger than I am today. And I have a very vivid memory of being up on the tower top, and the bridge was completely enshrouded in fog. And all you could see was the fog below, and looking to the north tower of the Marin Tower poking above the fog. Not many people get to see that in real life.
Yeah, so that sounds breathtaking.
It is absolutely unbelievable.
I'm also slightly scared of heights, so I would also be very frightened, but.
Well, you wouldn't realize you're there. The fog was so dense down below.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so next up, if your engineering career were a bridge, what kind of bridge would it be? Suspension, cable stayed, or something else entirely? And I'm going to turn that over to you first, Tom.
Okay, sure. Now, this one's an easy question. For me, don't even have to think about it. Suspension bridge. Okay. These bridges they're just so graceful. To me, they're so simple in form, and yet they're so great in majesty and might, if you will. And they're the longest spans ever achieved, are suspension bridges. So yeah, without a doubt, they're a mastery of structural steel and cable wire. I just love suspension bridges.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask curiosity, right? Like, is there a group of or factions of bridge designers and bridge engineers and bridge leaders, right, that would have said not suspension, or are there like people have like their niches, right?
Oh, I think so. There's many types of bridges, arches. Okay. They're all cool. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I'm a bridge person through and through, but if I had to say one, I don't really have to think about it too long.
Okay. All right. What about you, Seth? What would you say?
So at the risk of sounding perhaps a little poetic on the subject, I once heard someone to say that suspension bridges, they look very relaxed because of the way the cables are draped over the towers, whereas cable stay bridges look stressed because everything's in tension. And every career is filled with its challenges and its struggles, and anything that's worth achieving has that, but also great success on the far end. So I would have to say a combination of the two.
Okay. All right. That is very poetic. And, I think it's interesting how, being I'm on the complete opposite realm of things and very like cybersecurity and very technical, I don't know if I've ever looked at, something I produced and felt, poetic or emotional. And so I think that's kind of like one of those things where I think it's so amazing when I look at the bridges that I've seen and crossed, and it's just there's so much beauty. And so I don't feel that level of beauty or even that level of affection towards the things that we're producing. So I think that's super, like, it's just very cool to me to be in a space where you can take a step back and look at something either designed by you or not, and just feel it evokes emotion and an emotional response. It's beautiful. All right, last icebreaker. What drew each of you to bridges in the first place? Was there a moment early in your life that made you look at bridges differently? Like, what was the impetus for that? So I'll start with you, Seth.
Sure. So even though I'm in downtown Manhattan now, I grew up about 4 hours north of the city, very, very rural portion of New York, a very farm agricultural based rural part of the state. But I always had relatives down in the city. So in Manhattan and Queens, so we would always be driving back and forth, which meant many, many trips over the Whitestone Suspension Bridge. So I was exposed pretty early on. And as a young boy, there was always some trepidation going from basically farmland to 150 feet in the air. But my interest would always build, and we were always building things around the home. And as I went through high school, math and science, became attracted to that. So the fascination with bridges grew. But I would say the real spark was looking through the books, the big picture books that you see in the front of the bookstore as some of the engineering feats, and coming across a photograph of the Firth of Forth Rail Bridge, which at the time was the longest cantilever bridge in the world. It's still number 2, although it's got 2 spans. So even though the Quebec Bridge has a longer span, this is a much larger structure. And just looking at the magnitude and the massiveness of some of the components there, and how clearly the force distribution was able to be shown to, at that point, I was still just, a layperson, really piqued my interest. And as I was getting in through college, I began to study more and ask my professors more, and I could see that even though they were very smart professors, there were still gaps in the knowledge because it's really a focused expertise. And so it just sort of snowballed and became, a real passion.
That's awesome. And it's interesting that, it's developed over, the course of your lifetime from even like a young age, because, it's really true and near and dear to your heart and kind of like in your legacy. So I think that's really cool.
We were always building something growing up, and my father's a blacksmith. So whether it was carpentry or metalwork, the satisfaction of crafting something and having, a real work product at the end is very attractive to me.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it, like I said, it's a thing of beauty, right? Which is different than some of the things that other, professions or disciplines might produce, right? And so I just think that's a really cool concept. So what about you, Tom? How did you find your way into bridge engineering?
So I too am very much a builder of things. I think it's in the blood somehow. And I remember even as a child building things. And my friends, I grew up in Northern Virginia, even though my parents were born and raised here in New York. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and the neighborhood kids and us would go out in the woods and build things. Most of them wanted to build tree forts, but not me. I wanted to build bicycle trails. And then when you get to creeks and streams, we would build bridges over the creeks and streams. And then really, I think a big turning point was there was an 8th grade field trip. So I was a little older at this point, but not much. And they brought us to New York City. So I'd never been to New York City. It was the first time I've seen up close and personal any of these major suspension bridges, even though they probably were of interest to me just flipping through books and the like. But it was a really cool time, very memorable. And there are many suspension bridges here in New York, as we were saying before. So I think that sealed it for me. and dreaming of designing these magnificent structures was just too much to let go.
Yeah, absolutely. So both started very early on, and that's so interesting, about like the desire and how it grew along with you as you were growing into your careers and going into, studying. So that's a really cool concept. All right. So, focusing, a little bit more on career journey, part of, these series and these episodes is to expose, the viewers who are going to watch on YouTube or the listeners on other platforms to kind of, what is it about Parsons, right? You're here sharing your legacy with Parsons. So what has kept you at Parsons over the years? What's the it factor that makes this place different? And, in reference to your career journey and your experience. So we'll start with you, Tom.
Okay. So, first of all, I've always looked for opportunities to work on big bridges, and there's not very many firms that actually can do it. Parsons is, of course, one. One thing that just keeps me going is complex bridges they spawn new challenges all the time. And so then there's always new learning opportunities. You never stop learning when you're working on these big bridges. So anyways, however, somewhere along the way, I couldn't put a pinpoint on it, but over time, it became sort of a people and professional relationship thing as well. So in 2018, I was inducted as a fellow. I served on the fellows board. And that's when you learn, and it's quite humbling, there's a tremendous amount of talent in Parsons and skill and smartness, dare I say it. So I'd say for me, the it factor is both projects and people. They go together.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And that is also why I'm, entering my 10th year here at Parsons. It's just, the people that have been a part of the journey have been so instrumental into my growth and, leadership and just the total journey. And I also, everybody on the call or listening to the platform today, I'm also a fellow along with Seth and Tom, and that's how I actually know them. It's rare, that you get to work with a lot of different disciplines in one organization, and that was the beauty of the fellows program. So a little plug there. We'll drop a link for those who are gonna, listen to us on YouTube or Spotify so that they can learn more about the Parsons Fellows. But they're obviously very awesome because it has Tom, Seth, and myself all in the fellows program. So, all right. So Seth, to you, what has kept you at Parsons over the years? What is the it factor that makes this place different for you?
So Tom and I did not coordinate our answers, nor did you and I, Candice.
I don't
But
believe
there's
that.
a consistent theme, right? For me, it's the people. It's always the people. It's always been the people. I mean, we have some very deep technical knowledge. We talked about the history here and why that deep technical knowledge is here. But that's what makes it possible to win those big and exciting projects and continue to attract great talent. I've always been very fortunate to be considered and involved in great projects, and that looks like it's going to continue for the foreseeable future. There's tremendous opportunity here in the U.S. and we're organized in a way that we're going to talk about the Bridge Technical Organization later. I think we'll talk about how that is unique to Parsons and how that helps us win that work. But I'm also now in a position where I can help shape the tone of the company, and particularly the Bridge Technical Organization, hire great people, lead these massive teams that it takes to build the billion-dollar bridges. And it's very rewarding for me, and it's fun too. So it makes it always great to come to work and work with people you have a good time doing this hard work and rewarding work with. Yeah,
absolutely. So like, one of the things that you mentioned is kind of like Parsons' legacy, right? Parsons has a rich legacy in bridge design going back decades. So to you, what are some of the hallmark projects that really define Parsons' legacy? We'll start with you, Seth, and then we'll pitch over to you, Tom, after Seth.
Sure. So our legacy is vast. It's really it goes back to 1921 when David Steinman founded his firm. It went through a number of iterations, and in fact, his history goes back even prior to that with Gustav Lindenthal. But if anyone that knows anything about bridge engineering has seen the video of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge that collapsed in 1940 under a very moderate wind. When I was interviewing coming out of college, Parsons, then Steinman, but Parsons had the contract to build the new version of that. So the built out in 1930, it was 1940, it was rebuilt in 1950. And in the early 2000s, we built the parallel span to that. Very exciting. It's the first major bridge done as a design build in the United States. So it was a new delivery model, very dynamic, very interactive with the contractor. I think Tom's going to talk about the Tagus River Bridge we did in Portugal, so I'll leave that to him with all its iterations. We're getting a lot of positive attention now because we just did a major rehabilitation of the Brooklyn Bridge, but we also did one back in the 80s to get it ready for its 200th anniversary with some major work on it.
Wow.
It's before my time. I can't claim to be a part of it, but it's very exciting to know that what people see and what they think of as the Brooklyn Bridge today is here because of what we had done. We made some major modifications to it. The Williamsburg Bridge is not a bridge that's very well known outside of New York City, but it was actually condemned in the early 80s, I believe it was. Tom can correct me. But Simon at that time went in and investigated the cables and rehabilitated it and really set forward all of the standards that today's cable evaluations are based on, the very foundational work. Closer to home, we did for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, the Goethals Bridge replacement, which is parallel cable stayed bridges between the New York City borough of Staten Island and Elizabeth, New Jersey. It was a great project for me because it was actually the topic of my master's thesis when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
So I got to see it both from a student's perspective and also through design and construction and also
How many years later? How many years was it between?
Oh, Candice, you're not supposed to ask those types of questions. But it was about a 20-year span. So I was at Cornell from 97 to 98. It opened in 2018. And we still actually support the concessionaire to this day. So that's very rewarding.
Yeah, I'm like, that's amazing and kind of mind-blowing that you have been able to impact something that impacted you as a young man and, set this vision forth. So anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. No, I mean, I could keep going, but I will just say that good work on Goethals helped us to secure for the New Jersey Turnpike Authority the project we're working on now, which is just 4 miles upstream. It's going to be parallel cable stayed bridges. Very similar, but also very unique and separate from Goethals. So these projects, we don't have time to go into it today, but you see this aspect of this project inform that aspect of that project, which helps you win this project. And it's a life cycle. And,
right.
And to connect those dots it's really actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tom, I hope I didn't steal too much of your thunder. Sorry.
Yes, your turn, Tom. So hopefully, yes, Seth didn't steal too much, but same question to you. Just talk to me about Parsons' legacy in your opinion, and what are some of the hallmark projects?
So it's true that we go way, way back, literally generations of engineers. What comes to mind to me is the Thousand Islands Bridges. That's two suspension spans that cross the St. Lawrence Seaway into Canada, just north of Syracuse. We will still work on those bridges. I'll be going up there next week. We're doing some repairs and changing some suspenders, cables, and inspection work. So we got a crew up there now, and I'll be joining them in a week's time. The Mount Hope Bridge, and also in the 1930s, similar to the Thousand Islands in Rhode Island, and the St. John's Bridge out in Oregon comes to mind. Also in the 30s. These are all civil engineering landmarks. So it's really carries that legacy forward. From a hallmark perspective, I would say, I think probably the Brooklyn Bridge. Seth mentioned that we did work back in the 80s. I actually remember when that was going on. So I was here at Parsons in 1984. But he didn't mention that we also worked on it in the 1950s, right? So we were the ones, Steinman and Legacy Parsons, we were the ones that reconfigured the roadway. The Brooklyn Bridge was designed for horse and buggy and trolleys. And we were the ones that reconfigured the superstructure, allowing for vehicular traffic, which is the way it's configured today, and the promenade, which has cyclists and pedestrians, a very popular sight to see. And we did some other work along the way. The 80s was the big suspension system cable rehabilitation and down in the anchorages. And even as most recent as last year, we've completed the arch block reconstruction. And most people wouldn't even recognize the arch block as not the most photographed part of it, but there's long masonry and brick approaches that lead up to the suspension span. So it was a very big project for us to restore the arch blocks on both sides of the Brooklyn Bridge. So literally, if you think about it, we've been working on the Brooklyn Bridge for 75 years. I could portray that to 2, maybe 3 generations of bridge engineers here at Parsons. So I think that's a real legacy. I wouldn't want to take anything away from the Mackinac Bridge, which is just a fantastic project. That opened in 1957. And the Tagus River Bridge, which piggybacked right after the Mackinac Bridge opened in Portugal. The Tagus Bridge is in Lisbon. It opened in 1966 as a pretty sizable, I think it was the longest span in all of Europe at the time. Wow. A pretty sizable bridge. But then, if that wasn't enough, in the 1990s, we designed a lower level for railroad. And you don't see a lot of suspension bridges carrying heavy freight railroad. Right. So this carries railroad on the lower end, lower level, and it carries vehicular traffic on the upper level. So we added actually supplementary cables. So if you go to it today, you would see there's 2 cables on each side, but originally there was 1 on each side. So I think these projects stand well above the others, and therefore the iconic and legacy nature of them. That's my view of it.
So you just gave me an idea. Literally, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I maybe like 2 years ago, I traveled to like my 40th country and I crossed off my bucket list of all the countries I wanted to travel to. And I haven't really traveled a lot internationally since that happened. It's because I'm like, I don't really know what I want to do. But now I have an idea to go make, a list of these like bucket list bridges to go see, both domestic and international. But now that just sparked that, I'm like, I'm going to Portugal, because that just sounds awesome. And it sounds like something that I want to go to Lisbon and see. I've been to Portugal before and haven't spent a significant amount of time in Lisbon. So that just got added to my bucket list. So when I get there, I will make sure I take a picture, Tom and Seth, and send it to you guys from the bridge, because I'm now excited about traveling again.
If you contact us before you go, we'll get you a private tour. So it wouldn't be the first time we asked for that favor. They're more than happy, because we do a lot of work. We've been working for the infrastructure Portugal since 1966.
That's awesome.
And I join your ambitions because I'm going to Budapest in the spring. And there's a pretty cool bridge that I've always admired. I've never seen it in person, across the Danube. It's an old chain bridge that survived World War II. So I'm going to see that in the spring.
I'm literally taking notes right now because I'm adding that to my list. Now I'm going to Budapest too. I'm going to try to beat you there, Tom. When are you going?
May. We're going in May. We're taking the river.
All right, I'm going to try to make it. I'm going to try to make it there. All right. Sorry. I digress. Okay, so one of the things, and this is the last kind of thing I want to talk about as we go into some of these specific bridge, use cases later. Parsons has worked with a lot of longtime clients. And so this is the reverse side, right? Thousand Island Bridge Authority, the Mackinac Bridge Authority. How do you think having those relationships have shaped the way that you approach new projects, right? So you guys have talked about taking pieces and lessons learned into new projects, but also the client relationship and that synergy. So what do you think? I'll start with you, Seth. How has those relationships with your longtime client shaped how you design and how you approach new projects?
Sure. So when you deal with the rehabilitation of older structures, they were designed for different codes with different design philosophies, and that helps to shape how we see things over time and how the industry has evolved, and to some extent project where it's heading. So we also see what decisions were made back then that seemed perfectly logical, that may perform perfectly well, but have a downstream impact as far as long-term maintenance, and not every structure has a dedicated maintenance crew. So that impacts how we approach our design. So sometimes we have to go beyond the codes to minimize maintenance or extend the service life of structures. But it's also about really the people. I mean, when we're doing one of these large projects, it's 3, 4, 5, sometimes more years, 6, 7, 8 years. So when you deal with some of the same owners and operators for decades, I mean, you get to know these people, you share stories of births and weddings and major life events. And so you build a strong relationship, and that adds a sense of value to the mission, because you're not only achieving some terrific pieces of infrastructure, you're positively impacting someone's life that you're dealing with directly, but many people's lives, because
There are
these
millions of
structures,
lives.
yeah, and there are people that, quote unquote, live on these bridges doing maintenance day in, day out. And so we want to provide something that's safe for them and give them guidance how to do their work safely so they can go home to their families at the end of the day. So it brings a real human side to the job for me. And to me, that's a whole nother dimension that really validates the work.
Yeah, it's inspiring, right? Like you say, you are doing things that are making, the infrastructure safe for millions of people, right? And it is inclusive of those that are using that bridge to go to their locations, but also the people that are maintaining it. And that's just, like I said, inspirational and impactful. So I love that.
That came home very, very succinctly to me one day. We purchased our house from a family that was from Montreal. And of course, Tom would know that we designed a cable stay bridge in Montreal. And many years later, there was a knock on the door while we were making Sunday pancakes. And sure enough, it was the family that came back, and they just wanted to see how the house is doing. And they said,
Aww.
I think one of their elderly parents had gotten ill, and their sister was north of the bridge, and having the bridge there for a crossing that did not exist prior to made taking care of their parents that much easier back and forth. And so really in a nutshell, it's like, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, like I said, inspiring. I love it. All right, Tom, what do you think? So how, building your relationships, building, that rapport with your clients, how do you think that has influenced and shaped the way that you approach new projects or the way that you just innovate in general?
Right. So I think it's fair to say, and I have said this, nobody's proved me wrong yet, but the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority is our longest, at Parsons, our longest standing client. We have worked for the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority for 88 years, continuous for 88 years. And that's not to take anything away from the Mackinac Bridge Authority, which, if you include the design phase, for 70 years. So it's really generations. Now, I'll say, it's really fair to say we always strive to provide superior services to our clients. We just do. That's what we're in business for. But when you know a client on a first name basis and you've served them for generations, like I know the people that I worked with that are long retired, they've worked for the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority before I ever came along. So it's really generations. And you have a family-like bond at that point with the client. And many of us, I think, here at Parsons have established that bond with these long-term clients, for example, and Infrastructure Portugal too. We've worked for them for many, many years. So when that happens, there is no chance that you're going to let your client down in a time of need, right? There's no chance. And I can tell you that even before cell phones, these clients had my home telephone number. Now it's a cell phone, of course. They know how to get a hold of me 24/7, literally, and it has happened. I got a call on a golf course one day, and they said, "We need help." Well, that was the end of my golf match that day. I went home and got to work. So
I love that. And that builds trust, right? Like that in itself is like, that long-standing trust of, I know they're going to deliver. I know if, things happen, they are going to stop everything they're doing to make sure that we're okay and to make sure that the community that's using this bridge is safe, or, all of those things. So it's like, it's just an inherent trust that they have with that type of long-standing relationship.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to shift a little bit in direction. I want to talk more about the culture, like interworking, right, with Parsons and the Bridge Technical Organization. So talk to me about each of your methods, right, as leaders in the Bridge Technical Organization. How do you help break down silos and enable innovation across teams. And that could be intra-Parsons teams or your team with the client, right? That teammate should, like, how do you break down those silos?
Should I go first?
Yep, Tom, you take it away.
I'm still at it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I would say, at least for the Bridge Technical Organization, that it's the people and the way we have ourselves organized. That's how we operate. We're well connected throughout all of North America. It's a matrix. The BTO, so to speak, is a matrix organization that overlays the operational functions of East, West, and Canada. And we really do work together all throughout North America on pursuits and projects. There is no silos. You could be in California working on a project in New Jersey. You could be in Chicago working on a project in Texas. You could be out of Texas and working on a project in Florida. And we do that regularly. So the BTO, the leadership of the BTO, it's well known in the industry. And I think equally important, maybe more, we all know each other for many years. So we're a well-known entity within Parsons. We have an active steering committee. We have engaged influencers. We have technical communities. We all engage together on, like I said, on pursuits and delivery of projects. It's not just a few shining stars like some companies. We have many shining stars of people that have the same passion for bridge engineering that the leadership does. And I think that makes a big difference.
What do you think, Seth? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll add. I mean, Tom is 100% right. I mean, this industry does attract people with passion about it, but just like people are passionate about the industry, I mean, the BTO leadership is really passionate about investing in the future of our staff, really, to carry this legacy forward. So, I mean, one example is we have a BTO night school where BTO leadership, we volunteer. It's every other week on a Thursday night, and we bring together about a dozen, sort of future leaders, and we teach them all about project management, specifically from a bridge engineer's perspective. And it goes for about 6 months. So we're, I think, in our 6th year doing that. But we've structured it specifically to make sure that we have people from all over the country, including Canada. We structure it to make sure that they are each sponsored by a senior person in the BTO. And we do it so not only for the content of the material that's provided, but so that these folks, can build their own internal network at their own peer level and also have exposure to the BTO leadership. And, we don't think of it that way, but it truly does break down the generational silos. So people feel that they can reach out to someone within the organization that they may not report to, or they may not even be on a project. But, 6 months ago, someone said something that resonated with me, and I'm going to go give them a call and find out what they're talking about or get some technical advice. And, it really gives people a place and a sense of community. And we find that's, it's just really great to see people work together. And you see this sort of groundswell of, younger folks taking control of their careers and their projects. And you can really see who has that spark and who's going to be the next generational leadership. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, and it's interesting because you created like an advocacy network, right, for folks to be able to close out their own gaps, right? They get to decide, okay, I know I'm weaker in this area, or I know I want to be more knowledgeable in this area. So I'm going to come to this place where this information is readily available. So you're allowing people to advocate for themselves and to grow themselves. And that's super beautiful. So that's something that I might steal from your organization, right? Because we're always talking about how do we strengthen, our leaders in our space. And sometimes it might take more of a grassroots effort than a ELP or a leadership program push top down. That's more bottom up. And I think that's like a beautiful idea.
It's very simple to do. It doesn't take that much effort, and be happy to share the blueprint.
All right. I love that. Okay, so we've talked about this a few times. So, if you don't have a different example, completely understand. I know, Seth, earlier when we talked, you had said, the people is what made you stay. So I'm going to ask this question slightly differently and say, what makes Parsons different when it comes to bridge engineering? Is it the approach, the people, or is it something else entirely? And we'll start with you, Seth.
Well, I have to say, I mean, it's the projects that bring you in because you don't know the people, right? Like like I said, when I was shopping around, there was a Parsons at that time. Simon was delivering the Carquinez straight suspension bridge. It's the only suspension bridge on San Francisco Bay that nobody's ever heard about, but it carries Interstate 80. It's a very significant bridge. And they also had the Tacoma Narrows project. So I was drawn in from the type of work that we were doing. But you get here and you start working with teams and you realize these are extremely smart people, but they're also very approachable. And so you start building relationships. Over time, you start to realize that other people are looking towards you to lead, and not only technically, but also from a management perspective. And then you start to realize, you start to see into other companies, and, every company truly does have its own personality. Right. And what I like about Parsons, and it goes beyond this office, it goes beyond the bridge group, is that it's a very collaborative company. And it's a company where everyone wants to see someone succeed, even if you have a project that is struggling, because in a long career, some projects are going to struggle. I've never seen, the pounding of the table and the yelling and screaming that you see, in other companies or on TV or whatever. It's okay. What do we need to do to get through this? We've had some projects, here in the area, not bridge projects that have struggled. And, I will honestly and candidly look in a client's face and say, there are other companies that would walk away from this. We don't do that. We will work through it and we'll resolve the other issues later. We've got a project to deliver. We're committed to it. And we don't walk away from the hard ones.
I love that. What do you think, Tom? What do you think makes a difference at Parsons when it comes to bridge engineering? Is it the approach, the people, or something else?
Well, I'll just go back and say bluntly, it's the people, really, but it's not just that, right? If I think back in my career, that I've been doing this for a long time, Candice, and I learn a lot along the way, but somewhere along the way, it's sort of like the light bulb went off and you realize that you're successful because others helped you along the way, even though you probably didn't realize they were helping you at the time.
Absolutely.
Right. And so now when I look back, the Blair Birdsalls, the Jack Nixons, the Jim Sterners, who taught us so much, Ron Donches helped us tremendously. We still go visit him every now and again. It's the give back. And so now at my level in my career, I still like to do the engineering, don't get me wrong, but I like to share my experiences with the younger folks so that they learn. And they're going to learn one way or the other. They're going to learn the easy way or the hard way. But
absolutely.
If I can share my experience with them, then there's a lot of satisfaction seeing that be put to good use, and the engineering group here at Parsons grow and expand, so to speak. A lot of satisfaction there, really is.
Absolutely. All right, so shift a little bit. This was something that I had to kind of look up. So there are some folks that are going to be listening today because, again, Meet the Mission is broad. We cover a lot of different topics, and so bridge engineering might be new to some of the folks on the call. So Parsons has been a leader in design build since the early 2000s. And so I was like, oh, that's an interesting terminology. Can you guys just very quickly help us understand what design build means when we're talking about bridge engineering? And just talk to me about how does that model influence the quality and efficiency of bridges that we deliver today? So Seth, I'll start with you.
Okay, sure. So first of all, what is design build? Traditional project delivery was an owner, whether it's a Department of Transportation or agency, would hire an engineer to design a project. They would get that design 100% complete. They would take that design, say, thank you very much. And they'd go out to the contracting industry and say, okay, all you contractors bid on this. And typically they'd pick the lowest bid. Has its pluses and minuses, just like everything, but it's a very linear process. Design build, rather than an owner hiring a designer and a contractor separately, typically there are many different versions and tweaks and whatnot, but typically they would hire the contractor, and the contractor would hire an engineer as a subconsultant. So what that does is it teams up a contractor and engineer to develop a solution together. And so that solution could be different for every team to get to the most efficient solution for that team, depending on equipment or their expertise, or they see a particular risk in a project that a different team might not see. They could tweak it differently. So an owner in this scenario goes out with a concept. Maybe typically we like to say it's a 30% design, could be a variety, and they solicit full design and construction from a complete entity. So we like it a lot. We've been doing it since the early 2000s with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Parsons has been doing it even before that, but that was the first major bridge. And so for folks that really like to see things get built, I mean, you heard earlier in the session that Tom and I both like to do our own construction and build, and find ourselves in the middle of a problem and figure out how to get out of it. And that's really what design build is all about. You team up with the team, the people that are really going to build it, see what they want to build. They may want to do something that's not possible. They may want to do something that is looks good on the front end, but might not be efficient on the back end. We have to make sure it's compliant and safe, but it can really find a lot of opportunity to drive down the cost of construction. First of all, it speeds things up because you don't have to wait for a complete design. But the innovation that the designer and contractor bring together can bring in new technologies, can bring in different construction approaches, and that innovation typically translates to cost savings for the owner. And because our owners are public agencies, it is a cost savings for the taxpayer too. So all in all, everybody wins. It brings things to completion faster. It's very satisfying for those of us that like to see things get built. And I do think we're a very practical, delivery focused firm.
Okay, what do you think, Tom? How does that model influence the quality and the efficiency of bridges that we deliver today? And I think it's always interesting because, for decades, there was a period of time where maybe we weren't in the design build, realm of things. So your perspective is actually very interesting on, the timeline, right?
Yeah, so actually Parsons was early to get into the design build, earlier than many other firms. We were doing it out west in California first, and then Seth mentioned Tacoma Narrows. Tacoma Narrows was my first, we call it alternative project delivery, APD, because there's several types of design build. So Tacoma Narrows was my first, and that was a progressive design build, but we didn't call it that back then. So it's a little bit different what Seth mentioned, because what you do is you work with the owner and the contractor and the engineer to advance the design to a certain level. It could be 30%, 35%. And then the owner gets to, along the way, define what they like, what they don't like, what criteria they want you to design to, these sort of things. And then once everybody gets to that point of understanding and really putting a boundary around the risks for the project too, then there's a negotiated price. Right, and a negotiated schedule and risk sharing and all kinds of complications. And then it becomes just like what Seth described as a design build going forward. There's an efficiency there because you're getting the owner's input, and at the same time you're getting the contractor's input, the entity that actually has to build it, right? So they're telling you the means and methods, what sort of equipment they have or don't have, or whatever it is that needs to be done. So everybody is working together. There's also an efficiency in the design phase, is that the packages, you don't just complete the design and hand it over to anybody. The packages are released as they're needed. And so when I say package, the design for the foundations, for example, the main tower foundations are released to the contractor as they're needed. Then the tower, right? So they don't need the package for the superstructure necessarily to start building the tower. So it compresses the schedule of the project, and it's a faster delivery method. From a quality point of view, at least speaking on the realm of the really big and complex bridge projects, it usually has an independent check process. It could be an independent check by another firm. It could be an independent check within Parsons, but another team that was not involved. And so there's a full comment resolution between the designers and the checkers. And then that process is audited to make sure that everything's done and all the resolutions have been taken care of. And then those packages are released on a very specific schedule throughout the whole design phase and well into construction.
It sounds like a really innovative approach and way to kind of foster collaboration, early feedback, right? Continuous, improvement in delivery along those lines. So I think it's a really cool concept. Like I said, I had to look it up because that was something that was new for me. And I just think it's very interesting, the approach.
It's a lot of fun, but things move very fast. So you have to pay attention.
I can imagine. Okay, shifting one more time, I want to talk to you guys about maybe, a little bit of the behind the scenes. So can you share a behind the scenes moment where teamwork or problem solving really defined the success of a project? So, peeking behind the curtain. So we're going to start with you, Tom. Do you have a behind the scenes moment you can share with us?
I will. What comes to mind for me, and it's not a lot of thought before it pops in my mind, was the memorable moments of designing the big caisson foundations for the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So there's only two of them, one under each tower. They're about 75,000 tons each. Wow. They stand 210 feet tall, but you never get to see any of it but the top 10 feet. Everything else is underwater. So what happens is those are fabricated and then floated out, and you keep building on top of them until they slowly sink and sink and sink, right? Until they reach the seafloor.
Yep.
So that sounds pretty simple, but the challenge there is you have 12-foot tidal swings twice a day, and you have 8 knots of currents. So you have to anchor something that at maybe the first 6 months of its life weighs 50,000 tons. You have to anchor it in the spot where it belongs for maybe a year. We poured concrete for a year to finish those caissons. It was truly a collaboration between the designers, the construction engineers, the builders, and it just came out great. But there's a lot of risk in doing something like that. So you really have to be on your toes throughout every step of the way. And I was thinking before this call, by my guesstimation, you should fact check this, but I think Tacoma is probably the tallest and deepest caisson foundations in North America.
All right, I'm gonna fact check that one for you, Tom.
They're big. They're big. They're bigger than the Brooklyn Bridge and they're bigger than the Eads Bridge. So I don't know. We'll see.
That's so funny because you were like, it sounds simple. I'm like, it doesn't at all sound simple, but but you made it sound like it was a huge success. So,
it was a big success. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. What about you, Seth? If you could share a behind the scenes moment where teamwork or problem solving really defined the success of that project, what would you share with us?
Sure. So I'll go with a story from the Goethals Bridge replacement right here in New York. So one of the early innovations that we brought to the project was that concept design was one bridge that was going to carry eastbound and westbound traffic. And we took that and we said, we think it's actually more efficient from a revenue stream because it's toll, construction, flexibility, operational flexibility down the road, construction flexibility to split it into two structures. So we did that. And part of our pitch was all that flexibility. And it sounded good on paper. So, you'll never need that kind of flexibility, right? So sure enough, the eastbound bridge was supposed to be designed and constructed first. And in order to build the New Jersey Tower, we first had to demolish, I think it was a 5-story warehouse that shared the footprint of the new tower.
Okay.
And on the schedule, I think that was probably some number of weeks, a very quick demolition. It's just concrete, you knock it down, you drag it out of the way, and you're done. So of course, on day 2, you find asbestos. So those, 5 or 6 weeks became like 6 months. So we're plowing ahead on the eastbound design as fast as we possibly can because it's important. I mean, Tom talked about the different packages. What he didn't say is that we design from the top down because you need to know how much your bridge weighs before you can design the foundations. But the contractor builds from the bottom up. So right there's a schedule challenge you need to overcome. So the contractor walks into our office one day and says, this is a real schedule problem for us. But if I build a little temporary trestle across the front of these two towers, I can build westbound first. So do you think you can give me the westbound foundations? So, full stop, right? Panic mode. And okay, we're gonna pause everything we're doing on this schedule critical eastbound bridge, find another team or whatever. The details are a little fuzzy because it was a number of years ago.
Right.
Hyper accelerate the westbound foundations so they can build those while that demolition is taken care of. So that story that we told ourselves and that we, sold to the client of the flexibility in construction to have two separate bridges came to be a reality. And no one ever would have thought that would be true. I still to this day don't know how we pulled it off from a schedule perspective, but we did. And that goes back to everything we talked about before about the high quality teams and the collaboration and the innovation of design build. And it was really just a tremendous success that I will forever remember as being, yeah, that sounds good. We'll put in the proposal. And sure enough, it comes out to be true.
As soon as you said that at the beginning of that story, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to come back. And, I didn't know how it was going to come back, but it came back and it all, like I said, success. I think that's beautiful. Having that option and maybe there was a little foresight. I don't know, you never know. So,
it's one thing for us to be paused in design waiting for a decision, but when a contractor has this big expensive equipment that's tens of thousands of dollars a week, it can't sit around. And they're going to find a way to use it, whether you're ready or not. So you have to be ready because not being ready is just not an option. That is how we meet the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that was what I was going to say and that might be your piece of advice. I was going to shift into what is one piece of advice you would give someone early in their career who dreams of designing iconic infrastructure? What was something that you would share? And I'll start with you, Seth, and then we'll go to you, Tom.
Well, so I deal a lot with, high school and college kids and folks, looking for careers. And what I tell them is, be familiar with the industry. Back in the day, it used to be subscribe to ENR and read ENR. It's all online. But know what's happening in the industry just so you can be conversant and have an opinion or at least have an interest. It really goes far away from differentiating yourself from people that are just out there looking for a job.
Right.
But once you get into the industry, I like to tell people, don't say no. I mean, there's so much opportunity out there and you never know, when you help someone out on, this tiny little task because they're behind, what that could lead into. I had an engineer once that, I asked two people for an answer and I got a response back from one of them saying, I'm super busy. I really don't have time for that, yada, yada, yada. And in that same amount of time, another person who was busier gave me the answer.
Right.
So who am I going to go to next? Who am I going to trust? But you have to limit yourself. I mean, there's a balance between work and life. And sometimes that's a balance. Sometimes it's a juggle. And some days you win and some days, like they say, sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats you. But if you can be resilient and find your way to work through, those stressful times, because that is really when you learn. When you are stretched from a capacity perspective, you're gaining expertise, you're gaining skill sets. There'll be an easier time around the corner. Sometimes you got to muscle through, which doesn't mean you need to break yourself. You can always raise a hand and say, boss, I need a break or I need help. But having that open communication, accepting the challenge, and doing quality work that you can deliver on time so that people can trust your word seems to be an underappreciated thing in many circles these days. And it's old school, it's tried and true. It may be boring, but it's honest and it's honest work. And like I said, if you're working in a team, they need to be able to trust you. You can't ghost a team.
Yeah, I definitely agree with, a lot of points that you made there. And one of them being I tend to not say no. It's kind of been my mantra to if I have the bandwidth and I have the capacity to support an effort, whether it's a a step up, a lateral, whatever the case is, I tend to always say yes. People know that though. So I get a lot of requests and people are like, they know I struggle to say no. And so I end up, sometimes being like, all right, uncle, I can't take on anything else.
You gotta
Because
have
otherwise,
boundaries.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
do
gotta
have
have
to have
boundaries.
boundaries.
They're different when you have little kids at home or you have older
Yeah.
parents you're taking care of. But you
Yeah.
know, if you're at a place in your life in your career when you can say yes, you really should because it's just too much opportunity to miss out on.
Yep, and I completely agree. And I also agreed with the other thing that you said about, sometimes you perform in you grow in sometimes your most stressful environments or moments. It doesn't mean that, create this, unnecessary stress. So we're not saying like do things that are going to make you stress necessarily, but I do feel like I execute much more efficiently. I pull triggers. I make sure that I make very definitive decisions in moments where I'm like, I don't really have time to let this, spin or to be lax. I need to execute. I need to pull triggers. I need to, do things. And sometimes it's just I make the right decisions and I make them efficiently and I move efficiently when I don't have a lot of time to waste or a lot of slack.
And everyone is different when you're working on a big team and people have different work
Yeah.
habits.
Yep.
That can be like
That part.
sometimes you have to sit on your hands, but if they're delivering their work
Yeah.
and it's timely and it's correct, just because
Yeah.
you might walk past their desk and they're surfing, something, it's okay. As long
Yep.
as they do the
That's
work.
their style.
Yep.
It might be their style. Yep. I agree with that too. So, Tom, what about you? If you were to give advice to someone early in their career who dreams of designing iconic infrastructure, what advice would you give?
So I would say dream big,
Okay.
never stop learning, collaborate with others early and often, and surprisingly, I'm going to say be patient.
Okay.
And when I say that, it's these big bridge projects, they take years in development sometimes.
Right.
So I remember the Montreal project Seth mentioned, Auto Route 25. That was almost 20 years in the planning before we actually started the bridge. When you read the articles, you would think that we won the job, we designed it in a year and a half, and 3 years
Right.
later it was done. But it was years in the planning. And if you read about all these old bridges, Brooklyn Bridge, Golden Gate, Verrazano and Ours, they're all the same. Years and years in planning. And I do agree and wholeheartedly about don't say no when you get an opportunity. And I can tell you some of my greatest achievements at Parsons because when the opportunity came and I was asked, I didn't say no.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. Years ago, my boss was walking down the hall and I said, "Oh, good, I need to see you." And he goes, "Well, when I see you, you're not going to want to see me." And he said, "I need you to go to Santo Domingo tomorrow." And he asked me, "Do you know where that is?" And I lied and said yes. and I said, "Well, who am I supposed to meet?" He says, "I don't know. I'll let you know. This is the flight you need to be on."
Oh,
And
wow.
just go. So I go home. I had told my wife, I go home, I start packing. And she looks at me and she goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "No, it's real. I'm going to Santo Domingo tomorrow at 6 a.m. And so I met these folks who were supposed to meet up with. They were on my flight. I wasn't sure. I just walked up to a stranger. I said, "Are you working on a bridge in Santo Domingo?"
And it was the right person?
Yeah, it was all before cell phones and all, right?
Right.
But I can tell you a similar story again and again and again. It's just when you get this opportunity, don't hem and haw, don't overthink it. Just say yes, because it might not come around again.
Yeah. I mean, to me, these opportunities don't ever come around again, right? Like if you think about all of the experiences you have, it's like none are the same. No two bridges are the same. No two, projects are the same. And so, yeah, you might have to turn down some, but I mean, the expectation that something similar will come along again is completely like you can't have that expectation at all.
You cannot take that chance. No. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I love patience too. A lot of people don't really take their time to work through, their designs and from beginning to end. I mean, with your organization, you have to, but it's also something that people don't think about a lot of the time, to be patient and to, watch as things unfold and to make sure that you're making, solid decisions. Not everything's a rush to completion or a rush to the finish line. And that's beautiful too.
That's right. If you rush through it, you're not going to gain the experience.
Yep.
That's
I love
really
that.
what's,
All right. Well, one more question before we close out today. I'm so sad that our time is coming to an end. But I think this is always the portion of the episode where I really just want to, pick your brain and hear from you guys. If there was something you wanted to communicate with our listeners today about the future of bridge engineering, or anything that you think is a good takeaway from your experience in this organization and your leadership, what would you guys leave our listeners with, just as a final closeout or a final reflection? So I'll start with you, Seth.
Sure. So, here we've mentioned a couple of times, we're really a world-class bridge group with over 100 years of history in long-span bridge design. So, we take a real hard look at the past. We see what has worked well, what hasn't, what can be done better. And we work really hard to make sure that we get there together. So we continually build on our past successes. We've got exciting projects on both sides of the Atlantic, north of the border, south of the border. Tom and I have talked a lot about our projects that we've done here out of New York. We've got a tremendous bridge group in the Midwest and Chicago and out in California, and they do great projects all up and down the Mississippi. So we've seen a lot of collaboration between the two. So we've always had good projects to work on. We've always found it's that collaboration that gets us there. And so I'm particularly excited about continuing to build up our younger staff, and they're starting to play with AI and 3D modeling. And, it's out there a lot in the world, but our version of how all those things are applied are very specific. So the industry is tackling the generic, repetitious type work, and how that's going to evolve into ours. Are we going to help drive it? Are we going to be on the receiving end of it? It's some pretty exciting times, and it's coming at a time where the industry is also very busy. So finding time to advance that at our level is interesting. Something we work on every day, and some days we win, and some days we're just trying to get deliverables out the door.
So I do want to pick your brain very quickly about what you just said, right? What are your thoughts about, AI? And this is a topic that comes on all of our episodes, right? So, what are your perspectives or thoughts about how we do that AI fusion into this discipline or this domain?
Yeah, I think that's really evolving. And, there are so many entry points for that in the industry. It's a little hard to pick one, but I think one that we'll see more on the forefront is on the machine learning side of AI. There are a lot of bridges out there with structural monitoring sensors that can measure stress and strain and atmospheric conditions, and also way and motion systems. So as a truck goes over these scales or sensors, it can tell you how much the truck weighs. And so being able to pair that data with a structural model is, it's very exciting. We also have a lot of cameras on bridges, so for video analytics and to put all that together in some magic AI black box and get a reasonable answer out, not the academic answer of this is everything we can do with the data, but is it actionable information to help us better manage a structure, to see an incipient damage event that we can address before it becomes more costly. Personally, I think those are the nearer term things. There are some interesting things happening with, like I said, video analytics of how trucks perform in wind for blowover, vibrations of structures to see if the resonant frequencies are changing, and does that indicate something? So there's a lot of exciting things that can happen. Most of it, I think, is still in academia, and so we kind of keep our eye open for an opportunity to take that, kick the tires and bring it out in the real world.
Yeah.
But right now we're pretty busy on some other exciting designs. So.
Yeah.
But
no,
like
it's
I said,
it's. Go ahead.
Well, we talked about how the three of us are in the fellows. We've got a whole bunch of other bridge folks in the fellows group, and they coordinate with people on your side of the Parsons house that are dealing with all that AI and developing their own GPTs and analytics. And there's something there that really needs to continue to be fed until it's something that is actionable, ideally something that we can monetize as well. So there's a lot of excitement, but the entry point is still, I think, being assessed.
Yeah. And that's even on the cybersecurity side, right? There's a lot of conversations, right, where we decide to pull triggers for that inclusion or that adoption, TBD. So completely resonates the same way. All right, Tom, what about you? If you could leave our listeners with one message about the future, either the future of bridge building, careers, innovation, what would you leave our listeners with?
I look at it this way. We spoke today quite a bit about the legacy and generations of bridge building. We didn't touch all of them, but not even close. I was just thinking here at the moment, we have no less than 10 brand new bridges that we've designed across the Mississippi River, just for example. And we didn't even talk about those today. So sometimes you hear it said that a view of the past is a good way to visualize the future. So if you look at what we've done in the past for generations and let that serve as the basis, I don't think there's any doubt to believe that we'll be industry leaders in the bridge engineering for generations to come. We're not going to give that up. We're very well founded, and there's a bright future for bridge engineers at Parsons. And it's just the way we are. It's not gonna go away anytime soon. So that's my piece of advice.
Yeah. And I think the key word that I take away from this episode, and I always try to think of something in my episodes that I can make sure that we tag, right? For people to understand the topics or the themes. And I definitely think the theme of this is a combination of legacy, but also innovation. Because what's brought that legacy through is all of the innovation that's happened as you guys are encountering new designs, new things you want to try. And I just think it's really beautiful. It's it's rooted in both legacy, but also that forward-leaning innovation and thinking. And this organization is just, driving, in that direction of innovation and trying new things and mentoring its people. So I just think that's really nice, the combination of legacy and future leaning, forward leaning innovation.
It's truly continuous improvement. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
I love that. Well,
and it's fun.
Oh, what were you going to say, Seth?
I was just going to say it's fun. We have a lot of fun doing what we do. It's just the nature of the work and the people we work with. So
yeah, it sounds super awesome. And so this is that time where I'm going to turn back to the audience here and say, if you want to learn more, we will drop links in the YouTube comment section, also in the Spotify for you to take a look at parsons.com. Also look at parsons.com/careers. So you can look at opportunities that are available in the BTO organization, but just all across Parsons. So you can see the plethora of opportunities that are available. I really appreciate having both Seth and Tom here with me today. They are really innovators and, leaders in our organization. And so drop comments, in the YouTube or the Spotify channels. If you have any questions specific for them, I won't give y'all their email addresses, so you can't harass them directly. But if you drop comments into the channel that you're viewing, I'll make sure that Seth and Tom answer them. And I appreciate everyone that spent all of this time with us, and continue to imagine next. Have a good afternoon, everyone.